What is up, everyone? It is Saturday night. I had to check myself there, Ryan. It feels like a Friday for some reason. I'm not used to all these Monday night football games. This is the Shout Buffalo Bills football podcast. Like I said, it is Saturday night. We decided to go a little late night, Ryan, change it up a little bit.
Yeah, shout after dark or whatever we called it earlier tonight. So, you know what? I guess actually our normal time is after dark too, because it gets dark at like 4:30 p.m. now. But in theory, late night. That's what we're talking about here. So, a lot of good football talk here to have a few days before this game with the 49ers.
Yeah, it's such an important game in so many different ways that we're going to get into tonight. But I'm Matt Parrino. If this is your first time here, thank you for joining us. He is Ryan Talbot. Like we said, this is the Shout Buffalo Bills football podcast, and we are going to dive deep into this matchup. I'm looking at some of the comments. PJ's got his pajamas on. I got my pajamas on too, man. I got the backwards hat on tonight. It's a casual Saturday night. I mean, I'm going to go watch some, what we just started watching, Ryan? The Outsider on HBO.
Oh, I've heard good things.
Very good. It's Stephen King. So it's a little bit, scary. My wife is a little bit scared. She wants to make sure all the doors are locked. It's a fun little exercise that we go through every night. PJ also mentions that he's here for the Tops commercials. My man. Thank you for reminding me. We are the Shout Football Podcast, brought to you by Tops Friendly Markets, your neighborhood store with more. I picked up some hamburger meat from. What do you do, Ryan? What do you do? 85%, 90%? What do you do when you get the ground beef?
I try to get actually the 93 lean.
Ooh, look at you!
Yeah.
I sometimes go for 85 just because I kind of like a little bit of juice on the grill, get it going a little bit. But had some great burgers this afternoon. My son, that's another thing. Sharing all these things with your kids, playing some football on the weekend, grilling some burgers in the middle of December in Western New York. It's a good time to be alive, even though we're, in the middle of a pandemic and everything. But, how are you, my friend? I know you were sick a little bit last week. It seems like you're feeling better.
Yeah, I kicked it. I took every over-the-counter, medication you could for that, nasal decongestant. Gone. Happy
Beautiful.
to be here. Got a nice Christmas card from the Parrino family today. Thank you. Beautiful, beautiful card. So, yeah, feeling good. Having a nice little weekend here. So, ready to go.
It's going to be fun to watch, a full slate of NFL action tomorrow without the Bills playing. Get a chance to maybe catch up on some other teams. Where we don't really get to do that a whole lot during the year. This thing kind of, we hit the ground running every Sunday, all Bills all the time. So we'll get to enjoy that. But there is a Bills game that we have to talk about. It is Monday night, 8:15 p.m. on ESPN and locally on ABC, the Buffalo Bills and the San Francisco 49ers. And this is an interesting one because I think over the last couple of weeks, with some of these other matchups that the Bills have had on their schedule, you talk about Kyler Murray and the Arizona Cardinals, Russell Wilson and the Seattle Seahawks. Without Jimmy Garoppolo and George Kittle, it's almost like you kind of look off into the distance, that San Francisco 49ers team, and say, there's bigger fish to fry on this schedule. But then all of a sudden you get here, and this is still the San Francisco 49ers team with a lot of the same pieces that went to that Super Bowl last year, and a head coach in Kyle Shanahan that's figured out a way to get this offense moving with Nick Mullins, who we're going to talk a little bit about. I mean, this is setting up to be a lot more difficult of a game than I think maybe people were even anticipating 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I know a lot of people are looking ahead to that Pittsburgh Steelers game, but this game's going to be tough. There are some 49ers fans, and I saw our friend Sal mention it, but I've seen it in my mentions as well. A lot of fans feel that Nick Mullins might be the better quarterback, as my cat comes crossing through on schedule here. I'm telling you, like every show now, think that Nick Mullins might be the better quarterback for this offense between the two of them. So there's not really a steep decline between Jimmy Garoppolo and Nick Mullins. And you can't say that for most teams in the NFL. Usually there's a big drop off from your starter to your backup. Not necessarily the case here. Now, George Kittle being out, huge for the Bills. But they still have Raheem Mostert. They still have Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk. They have a ton of talent on that offense, and the defense is kind of playing pretty well too. So it's not going to be a walk in the park. It's going to be a tougher game than I think some anticipate, but I also like the Bills in this matchup for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, we'll get into the reasons as we move along this show. And if you have questions, if there's something specific about this matchup you'd like us to touch on, we're going to get into a whole slew of things on this show, some storylines, some matchups, some different things that we like, and then obviously the prediction at the end. But if there's anything that you specifically want, put it in the comment section and we will hit it as we go along. But I want to start off with Josh Allen. And, we're coming off of a game, Ryan, where I think that it was a good thing that the Bills were able to establish the run a bit, get Devin Singletary going, get Zach Moss going a little bit. And for a big stretch before last week where it was a struggle to do that. And so you saw Josh Allen in this passing a game kind of take a back seat last week, only 24 passing attempts. We've grown accustomed to, at least 30 per game for most of this season. So it was a different vibe, but the Bills really controlled that game. It wasn't until the fourth quarter when the turnovers started popping up, 3 turnovers, in fact, in the span of 8 snaps, that where the game even kind of became somewhat close. And so now you look ahead to this week and you look at the defense that Josh Allen and this Bills offense is going to be facing. And it's a defense without a few big pieces from last year. I mean, you think about Nick Bosa, who was, the Bills just saw his brother Joey last week. And so the lineage there, the Bosa family name looms large in the NFL. Deforest Buckner, who was a force on the interior last year. Those 2 pieces are not going to be there. Deforest Buckner, obviously now in Indianapolis. But you're seeing them manufacture, pressure and disruption in other ways. We saw last week Javon Kinlaw, the rookie that we spent a little bit of time, in the offseason talking about as maybe a potential target for the Bills if he were to fall, because if you remember, his draft stock was starting to spike as we got closer and closer to the draft. A guy that, people loved and thought that he was going to be a playmaker. He made a big play last week. But I think in this game, you look at Josh Allen and what he is going to be working with and working against. Number one, first and foremost, I went back and listened to Sean McVay's post-game press conference. The Niners beat the Rams 23-20 last week, and he basically called out Jared Goff and says, our quarterback has to take care of the ball. And this is coming off a week where Sean McDermott's quarterback didn't take care of the ball. So if he's not able to do that on the road against a good defense, it could be a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's every single week in this NFL, but especially against a good defense like this. You're right. They're missing some pieces from that Super Bowl team 1 year ago, but there's still talent in all 3 phases. There's guys like Fred Warner. There's guys in the secondary that are really good that will take advantage of any mistakes that Josh Allen makes. So if that happens, that can lead to some points for the 49ers. And that's similar to what happened in that Tennessee Titans game earlier this year. The turnovers, the field position, it got Buffalo in a hole that they could not come back from. So, you don't want it to be deja vu all over again in that situation with the turnovers. It's important that Josh Allen protect the ball. Now, I think that Allen has a good opportunity in this game to hit up especially one wide receiver, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But if they can also show some more balance, like you mentioned, get that run game going, keep the defense on its heels, I think that Allen could have another very efficient game and have a game where maybe we don't see those head-scratching turnovers.
The San Francisco 49ers got back Richard Sherman last week, and he comes back in his first game since week 1, gets an interception. He's one of the best in the game, and there's no way around it. He is going to be opportunistic. He's going to take advantage if there's a mistake made in his part of the field. But I think to your point, at all 3 levels, I mean, they have playmakers. I mean, Greenway last week, you watched that Rams game, and he just keeps popping with big plays. It's speed, coverage ability at the linebacker spots, the ability to rush the passer. I mean, they lose Nick Bosa, and, who do they bring in? That Kerry Hyder Jr., who's having himself a career year this year, but he's a problem. He's somebody that on the edge, they're going to have to concern themselves with. So it's just a situation where I think Josh Allen has to continue to be composed. And I think if you're a Bills fan, you sit back and you think back to some of the national TV games earlier this year, and even the Houston playoff game last year, with all eyes on the quarterback and all eyes on the offense, and some struggles in those games. And you hope that maybe Josh Allen can kind of reach into the bag of memories and pull out some of those ones from, that Dallas Cowboys Thanksgiving game. But even then, we're not talking about the level of defense that he's going to face on Sunday.
No, I agree with that completely. A lot of talent in that 49ers defense, but I really think that Brian Daboll has done a great job this year against every defense that he's seen in terms of game planning for their talents, attacking the defenses in weak spots, taking advantage of some over aggressiveness at times, like we saw with some screen passes, well-timed screen passes at times. So I feel like Buffalo is going to be well prepared for this matchup. I still think that they have a lot of things that they can do on both sides of the ball to rattle Nick Mullins defensively, but on offense to also move the ball up and down the field.
Let's get into that one, because I'm going to go to the comments a little bit as we go here. And that's one of the big things that we've been talking about all week, in the social circles, is the importance in this game. And I saw it mentioned in the comments here, of stopping the run, because with Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson, they have two guys that are downhill, absolutely blistering fast running backs. But what stood out to me watching them is that they don't shy away from contact. They use their speed to initiate the physicality. And so if you're not up to the task at the linebacker position, in the secondary, in terms of tackling, they can really hurt you. I mean, Kyle Juszczyk, their big fullback, he's unbelievable when he's on the field. I was listening to Greg Cosell on a couple of spots this week. I was watching NFL Matchup, and then he did some San Francisco radio. And he was talking about when, on that show, what do the Bills do schematically when Juszczyk is on the field? Because, it's kind of a tell. They're probably going to run. I know he can catch the ball out of the backfield, but in their, traditional nickel package with Taron Johnson, it could be a struggle at times to deal with this running game.
Yeah. Mostert, I know he wasn't that impressive last week against the Rams, but this is a guy that's still averaging over 5 yards per carry, averaged over 5 yards per carry last year. He's the real deal. He's going to be tough to bring down, like you said. Same thing with Jeff Wilson. Bill's defensive line has to be stout. Now, the good news is we did see a very good run defense last week against the Chargers. Austin Eckler, coming back from an injury of his own, he's no slouch. He's one of the most talented backs, dual threats running back who can also catch the ball. But they limited him. They limited Joshua Kelly to about 3.2 yards per carry between the two of them. So you're hoping that just like we're starting to see some more success getting after the quarterback, that maybe we're starting to see this defensive line and that front seven figure out things in run defense as well. So this is a huge test for them because things don't get easier. You have a Pittsburgh Steelers team that can run. You have a Denver Broncos team that's going to run. A New England Patriots team that pretty much that's all they can do offensively is run the ball. That's including with their quarterback. So Buffalo's run defense has to be pretty stout in this final stretch of the season, and it starts on Monday Night Football against the 49ers.
There's a comment in here about Brian Winters, and we're going to get to the offensive line. So, Justin, stick with me. I'm going to bring that up in a little while. But one thing I want to cover, too, early on here as we move through, we have a bunch of things. We're going to talk about Matt Milano. We're going to talk about these linebackers. We're going to talk about Gabriel Davis and John Brown still being out all later in the show, some matchups as well. But the line movement this week has been really interesting, Ryan. It opened as the Bills as a 3-point favorite. It's now moved. So much public money has come in on the Niners. They are now -1 as we sit here on Saturday. I guess to start off with, you start thinking about it. What do you think it's the few days here that we've had to mull on the, knocking off the Rams, who I think many experts were starting to talk about Super Bowl when it comes to the Rams and Sean McVay and what they're doing out in Los Angeles. Do you think it's that starting to marinate, or do you think that there's questions about this Buffalo Bills team even as they sit here at 8-3?
Yeah, I wish I did have the answer for that question. I think it's very interesting, the fact that the Bills are now the underdogs in this game. It was an impressive win for the 49ers, but they had to come back in that game. The Rams built a nice lead, and then they couldn't finish. Buffalo hasn't been able to finish any games this year, to be quite honest. They've kept up almost every team in every game. So Maybe they're looking at it in the fact that the Bills haven't been able to put away teams. Maybe the fact that the Bills have to travel across the country. Maybe the fact that the 49ers are simply getting healthy again in a lot of the right spots with Mostert, with Richard Sherman, with a lot of those other pieces on defense as well. So I'm not quite sure why. I don't think it necessarily has to do with the Bills, because the Bills are still playing good football. They're very healthy if you look at the injury report. Minus John Brown, obviously, Matt Milano potentially returning in this game. So I think it just has more to do with the 49ers and the Bills in general, but that's still a big swing in terms of going from, -3 to -3 to +1.
PJ asks, how do you foresee the Bills offense attacking, this 49ers defense? Because, one of the things we're going to talk about is how the Bills kind of shifted a little bit last week in terms of how they approached that game, especially against the Chargers defense that I don't think, while Joey Bosa is obviously a formidable foe, I don't think that, that defense was one where I'd be afraid to throw it against them. I think that they went in off the bye wanting to establish the run a little bit. They did that, by any means necessary. I think this is a game, despite the advantages that maybe San Francisco has in different matchups, depending on where you look, I still think this is a game where you rely on Josh Allen to go out there and make plays. And I think that they're going to want to try to get the running game going, but I also want to see, maybe some improvement on this offensive line. And maybe this could be a nice transition to talk about Brian Winters. I think that one area last week that they struggled was in pass protection. And I wonder how much that might have had to do with the shifting of the game plan in the second half, specifically in that third quarter, getting the run game going as they were struggling to block for Josh Allen. If you struggle to block for Allen in this game and he's forced to deal with consistent pressure all game, not only is that a bad thing, but that's when those turnovers can potentially creep in.
Yeah, and not blocking Joey Bosa in general is usually a bad omen as well, and that's exactly what happened when they brought Matt Barkley in for his snap. Premier elite defensive ends, edge rushers, they're going to win matchups, bottom line. But last week the Bills could not stop Bosa. They were getting beat though a lot in that game. Josh Allen was facing a lot of heat, a lot of pressure. Now, there were certain plays where Allen was trying to do a little bit too much, such as the play where he kind of hurt that ankle or the knee. We saw him come back in the second half with that knee brace on under the pants. So the Bills need to be better on the offensive line. We know this. We've talked about this. And the weak link is Brian Winters. And, you've done a really good job mentioning it week after week. We kind of get the same response from Sean McDermott, but at the same time, something has to give there.
Yeah, and like somebody asked me this week, are we still going to get Brian Winters this week? And because of the way things are now at practice, we're not really able to divulge the information that we're seeing. It's a lot like training camp where, if I'm seeing a specific person lining up at first team, second team, I can't really talk about it. But what I can say, or report it, but what I can say is I do think that there might be some consideration for changing things up. I don't know what that could look like, or maybe I do, but I can't talk about it. But I might say, maybe sit back and see if maybe they don't go with a different look on Monday night. We'll definitely have you covered. Make sure you're following us on social media. Although I just thought about this, we will not be in San Francisco, so I'll have to see if I can get some boots on the ground there to watch some warm-ups as they start going through these things. But to your point, Brian Winters, it doesn't take a football savant to recognize that he's struggling in a lot of areas. I mean, just missed blocks, guys getting through. A lot of the disruption that seems to be happening seems to consistently be in his area of the line. And I think that there was even a play last week where he got out on I believe it was a screenplay, and it looked like he completely just missed his block, whiffed on the block, whiffed on the the setting, just where he was in the field and what his responsibility was. And, I asked Brian Daboll about that this week. I asked Sean McDermott about that, and Justin brought it up. And obviously noticed my diligence, because I'm interested to know, okay, 9 starts here now. There must be something happening that's telling you that you should continue to trot him out there at that spot, or he's your best option. And they seem to believe that, and again, they're not going to trash Brian Winters. They're not going to trash one of their guys that, he's playing terrible or he's not very good. Of course not. But the fact that they still think that he's adding something, to me, Ryan, is a little bit concerning. But at the same time, something important to note. We don't know everything. We don't see everything. And this is something that was happening with AJ Klein, where a lot of us, on the media side, and fans watching at home, they're like, man, this AJ Klein is playing terrible. Like, is there not any other better option? Remember the Darren Lee, saga as the Bills were, ramping things up to sign him. It was like, get Darren Lee in here, get him on the field, get AJ Klein off the field. And now we've seen AJ Klein play so well, to the point now where he's the reigning AFC Defensive Player of the Week. And there might be something happening behind the scenes that we're just not seeing.
It's possible. It's possible that they're seeing that someone else is missing an assignment and Winters is going over to help, or I can't explain it. But when I watch him, it looks like he's getting pushed backwards. It looks like he's out of position. He's getting beat. He's really struggling in both run blocking and pass blocking. And it makes the right side of the line, the weak side of that line. Darrell Williams, as good as he's been, is kind of one-dimensional in terms of being a really strong or pretty strong pass protector, but he even struggles a little bit against the run. So you have that on your right side. Of course, you're going to keep running to the left. And that's what we've seen this year. So you're right. There might be something we're missing that we might not be seeing. Maybe they feel like, hey, we really want John Feliciano at left guard. We don't want to put him back at right guard. They might not feel comfortable with like Buckner at right guard. They might think he is a left guard. Ryan Bates, who knows? They might just like the fact to have him as a backup because of that versatility and the fact that he can play all over the line. Whatever the case may be, though, to my eye, to your eye, to the fans' eyes, Klein has struggled. Now you're saying Klein. Winters has really struggled this year, and I haven't seen many flashes of improved play. You're right. That screen pass that you mentioned, I went back. I think it's the one that was to Singletary, and Morse actually went out and had a really nice block in front of him, and then Winters just like whiffed on his. That really could have set up something big for Singletary.
We're going to get into more of this game and your questions. Drop them in the comment section on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. We appreciate you joining us in the live late night Saturday edition of the Shao Podcast. But just for PJ, a quick word from our sponsor.
Ready for football? Tops is with ready-to-serve fan favorites everyone will cheer for. Delicious family or party packs like pizza, sliders, fried chicken, barbecue, or beef on weck. Starting at only $4 per serving. Perfect for game day and any day. Only at Tops.
All right, let's go to the San Francisco offense for a little bit here. And, we talked a little bit about Nick Mullins at the top of the show. And, you go and watch what he does, and it's funny for a game manager, from my perspective, and I haven't watched a ton of Nick Mullins this year, it seems like he does take some chances. Like you could see a little bit of the gamer in him, like almost a little bit of a poor man's Josh Allen. I feel like sometimes he just wants to, lay a pass in there, and he took some chances last week, and there were some errant passes that I think if San Francisco's in the right spot, I mean, they could take advantage of it. It's going to start with stopping the run, but I also think that you can frazzle Nick Mullins into making a mistake, maybe 2, maybe 3. We'll see. But let's talk about this defense for a second. On this front, 30 sacks through 11 games. They rank 9th in the NFL in sacks. Cool stat too. Since week 7, the Bills put this out. The defense has combined for 29 sacks and takeaways. 19 sacks, 10 takeaways. That ranks 2nd in the NFL since that time, behind only the New Orleans Saints, who I think are one of the best defenses in the NFL. So this defense is playing at a very, very high level right now. And I think what they need to do is they need to continue that. They're going up against a San Francisco team that has really good some good pieces on the offensive line. I think they're starting to find their center. They got Trent Williams, who is an absolute beast at left tackle. But I think that there's matchups there that they can win. And I think that's maybe this could be a game where you can maybe see that stat pop a little bit for Ed Oliver.
Yeah, Buffalo's defensive line, when Eric Washington took over as defensive line coach, you knew his resume. You knew that Carolina was generally in the top 5 in sacks and along the defensive line. We knew the talent that the Bills had at linebacker. We know that they like those delayed blitzes and they like sending members of the secondary, specifically Taron Johnson, a lot off the edge. And now we're kind of seeing a culmination of all of it. The defensive line play has been so much better over the last few weeks against the run and in terms of getting pressure. We've talked about AJ Klein. Tremaine Edmonds is healthy. You get Matt Milano back. If you get him back, look out. That linebacker unit could really be flying around the field. And we already know the secondary has been playing good football in terms of coverage, but they also get those blitzes, those time blitzes where they get in there on the quarterback. Nick Mullins is not Russell Wilson. He is not Kyler Murray. He's not a guy that's going to have that escapability, that's going to break off huge plays. Now, it might happen once, so there might be a play where he gets away from pressure and picks up a first down with his feet, but he's not a guy that takes off and has that speed that can hurt you. I think the Bills sending pressure can rattle him, can get to him, can sack him, strip fumbles like we saw from Ed Oliver last week against Justin Herbert. You mentioned it. He likes to kind of he's accurate, 67.5, I believe, percent completion percentage. But he's also 6 touchdowns, 7 interceptions this year. He throws some risky passes, and sometimes they get intercepted. Now, the Bills haven't been in the right place at the right time on those tip balls that go up in the air, but we've seen Trey White read quarterbacks really well these last few weeks, jump routes, make some plays. I wouldn't be shocked if the Bills create a few turnovers against Nick Mullins. I think Mullins will make his fair share of plays, but this is a quarterback where I think the Bills can come in and can rattle him, just like they did Justin Herbert last week. Herbert was, I still think he's going to end up being the rookie of the year, but they had him off his game all game last week. He throwing some errant passes, feeling that pressure. If they can do that against a quarterback like that, if they can do that against a Russell Wilson, I think they're going to be up to the task and do it against a Nick Mullins as well.
Let's talk a little bit more about this linebacking unit, particularly for this game. So as we're sitting here now on Saturday night, there's nobody with an injury designation on the final Bills injury report, which is crazy. They're healthy, obviously. John Brown is on IR. Matt Milano and Tyrell Dodson, they're still on IR, but designated to return. They could return to practice this week. There's no indication yet if they're going to be available for Monday, because the Bills actually have until Monday at 4 p.m. New rule in the CBA because of the COVID season that you have up until that deadline to activate your players. Shout out to Sal Capaccio for figuring that out as usual. He's always up on the CBA stuff and roster stuff. He's a real nerd with that stuff, but in a good way. I always joke with him. So we could find out on Monday whether or not Matt Milano or Tyrell Dodson will be available. And I think this is a game where you're going to want some more numbers at linebacker. And the Bills, they play about 90% nickel, like we mentioned earlier in the show. This is the kind of game where I feel like you might throw a curveball at this offense and maybe line up in your base a little bit more. Matt Milano is probably going to be on a pitch count, even if he comes back. I asked Leslie Frazier, I asked Sean McDermott about that this week. He said he didn't want to, get too much into what the timeshare would look like, but he did say, just remember, AJ Klein's been playing and Matt Milano hasn't. And Leslie Frazier said it's going to be about, bringing Matt Milano in, seeing how much he can do. And at the same time, it's not going to necessarily take away from AJ Klein. So it's so interesting. I'm very interested to see how they end up using all of this, because now you have a real weapon with AJ Klein, who I think if after the year, if everybody was being honest, AJ Klein wasn't that in the first 2 months of the season.
No, and the cool thing about the CBA with Matt Milano is Sean McDermott can kind of hold those cards close to his chest here until hours before kickoff, and then say, and I'm not saying he is going to play, but if he does play, the 49ers weren't going to go on and specifically game plan for it, but that's just another weapon for the Bills. And you're right, pitch count will happen. You probably put Milano out there on those obvious passing situations where you can have him in coverage. Now, if you think it's an obvious passing situation, you want to rush the quarterback, Milano can do it, don't get me wrong, but Klein's been really good at that too. So ease him back into this. He still has a partially torn pectoral muscle. I don't think 3 weeks on the IR is going to heal that completely. I think it was smart to give him that time to get closer to 100%. But you want to have this guy for the final stretch, but more importantly, for the playoffs. If you get into those playoffs, you want a linebacker like that who can help you in many ways. So this is an important game. Every game is important as the Bills are looking to win the AFCs for the first time since 1995. But be smart about it, especially with the way Klein's playing right now, so you don't have to overutilize him right out of the gate.
Go check out, I put up a story yesterday, shameless plug, obviously, New York Upstate, Syracuse.com, whichever one you like to use, and go read the linebacker story that I put up yesterday, because there was a interesting piece of it where I concentrated on some really cool perspective from AJ Klein, who played with Luke Kuechly, backed him up in Carolina, so he knows a little bit about middle linebacker play. And we basically asked him, like, what is Tremaine Edmunds' fit? Because there's been some questions about maybe potentially long-term moving him to the edge, giving him a bit of a different role, and he basically stopped us in our tracks. And I think I asked him about it, and somebody else did too. I can't remember, but he basically said he's a true middle linebacker. Everything that he could do, sideline to sideline. We can see how he's making plays, especially now that he's healthy. I went and listen, I think Pro Football Focus, I think that we could have a whole podcast on how to utilize their tools. But one thing I do like about their grading system is I think it offers you a way to, maybe watch the game and then see if your takeaways and what you took away, how that matches up with somebody else who watched the game. And sometimes you're going to disagree. I had a lot of disagreements on Josh Allen over the years. I think as I've kind of come to understand their system a little bit more and why they grade a certain way, I think it's a little bit more understandable. But it did definitely feel like at times that there was a little bit of an agenda there to kind of meet with a narrative. But I think overall the grading, while I don't think it should ever be considered gospel, I think it's interesting to take it in and see how it matches up. And I thought Tremaine Edmunds played really well last week. I thought it was his best game of the season, which is crazy because AJ Klein played so well and obviously was awarded for it. They were graded out probably about the same at about 90 overall in run tackling, which is going to be huge this week against Mostert and Wilson. And don't forget about Jerick McKinnon, who they like to sprinkle in everywhere you look in this backfield. Their speed. We're going to get to another speed element in a minute. But I think that anything else on that, Ryan, before you transition to your big matchup to watch?
No, I think that was really well said across the board. And you're right when it comes to the analytics. Not just with Josh Allen, but I've seen quarterbacks have 4 touchdowns, 0 interception games, and the quarterback on the opposing team ends up getting a higher grade. So there's the interceptable pass argument. There's all this other talk. So, take it in, look at what the analytics say, but also kind of sit back and say, well, listen, I know what I watched. I know what I saw. Every quarterback has some bad throws in a game, 1 or 2. But that goes for any position too with Pro Football Focus. You can look at a game and say, I thought they played really well, and then they get a 60 for run blocking if it's an offensive lineman, or they get a 70 on defense. It's all over the board.
But what's important to know about that though is that 60 is like a solid game, 70 is like a good game, and I think like 80 and above is where you start to get into like excellence. You know what I mean? And for a while, when I first started really getting familiarized with that, I didn't know that. I thought I saw 60 and I'm like, man, when I got a 60 in class, I absolutely sucked. I mean, I'm sure when you got a kid coming back talking to you about a 60 in class, it's not a great conversation. So I think that's where the big disconnect is.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. I think that was perfectly said.
Cole Beasley, tell us about him.
He's my guy to watch in this game. He is the player that I think could have a huge game against this 49ers defense. If you look at the 49ers defense, one area where they are really beat up is that nickel cornerback spot. Kwan Williams is out for a few more weeks. Jamal Taylor was his backup. He tore his ACL. I believe it was last week, maybe it was 2 weeks ago. He's out for the season. The third option is questionable for this game, Manuel Mosley. So they are down 2 players. Their third option is questionable. I've seen Cole Beasley go one-on-one with some really good cornerbacks, not just slot guys either. I go back to that Arizona game and Patrick Peterson where he froze him off the line. If you have him matched up against your number 3 option in that slot cornerback position, I think Beasley's going to win 9 times out of 10 off the line. Get him the ball. Get those quick passes out to him. Let him – I know he's not a huge run after the catch guy. He usually gets a few yards, dives down so he eludes that contact, a la Isaac Bruce, a la Torrey Holt in those Rams where, they'd make plays, they'd get the first downs, and they'd get to the ground so they didn't take those hard hits. It's smart. It's smart football. Utilize him. Get him involved. I think that at the end of the day, you could realistically get him 10 receptions or more in this game and really utilize him to move the chains throughout this contest.
I love that because I feel like you want to get Cole Beasley going this week, especially on the heels of just like a lack of action last week for him. And I think that that's probably one of the area that was it your article? Yeah, it was your article where it was like feed Cole Beasley or Cole Beasley going to eat this week. Go check out Ryan's. Which one? You put up so many stories last couple of days. That was the
6 things to watch.
Yeah, 6 things to watch. Go check that out. He put up 2 stories over the last 2 days. Go read both of them. But one of them was focusing on Cole Beasley, and I think that you go back to last week and where San Francisco or Los Angeles struggled. They didn't get Cooper Kupp involved. I don't think he had a target in the first half. And when you have talented playmakers like that, you have to get them the ball. You have to figure out a way to get them the ball. And for me, my big matchup to watch is on the other side of the ball and a receiver that can then line up anywhere. And that's Deebo Samuel, who returned in a big way last week, had double-digit catches, 133 yards. He's a playmaker with the ball in his hands. They like to get it to him in the backfield. They do a lot of jet sweeps, a lot of different motions with him because once the ball's in his hands, the speed's there, but also the physicality. He's a really good blocker. They're going to welcome back Brandon Ayuk this week, which maybe it's probably going to open things up even more. I think I was listening this week, and don't quote me on this. They might have had one game this year, part of one game this year, where Ayuk, Deebo, and Kittle were all healthy at the same time. I mean, there's the potential that this offense could get real healthy over the next couple weeks and could be a problem if they can sneak it in the playoffs. But with Samuel, you look at how the Bills are going to have to play him. And I asked Tre'Davious White about this. Like, okay, you got this guy that can kind of do so many things and line up so many different areas. Traditionally, a playmaker at receiver like this, you would think, okay, that's going to be Trey White's responsibility. Well, the responsibility is going to be all over the map for this guy because, this is a big piece where if you can have Matt Milano back in this available, that gives you another athletic, fast guy that you can rely on as a tackler, at least when he's healthy. That's the key to this game. Bills have to tackle because if you let this team get second opportunities and 4-yard gains turn into 8-yard gains and 7-yard gains turn into 10-yard gains, then you're giving up first downs. You're letting teams sustain drives. And then you go back to where this defense was struggling earlier in the season when they couldn't get off the field. Go back to last week. 3 for 16, the Chargers were on third down. The Bills have to do that again this week as much as they can, close to that number. And a big piece of that is stopping Deebo Samuel. So you're going to want to see Taron Johnson tackling. You're going to want to see Dean Marlowe tackling when he's out there. Another guy, we keep asking for it. We don't get it, but maybe Saran Neal is a guy you might be able to use in this spot.
Saran Neal might be a guy you have to use in this spot. Deebo Samuel is a big guy, and no disrespect to Taron Johnson, who I think has been playing very good football over the last few weeks. I'd be very concerned about those two in a one-on-one matchup in terms of, hey, Taron, go tackle this guy. And like you said, if you don't bring down Deebo Samuel immediately, that 4-yard gain, that 8-yard gain can go to the house. He's that kind of a freakish wide receiver. I love Deebo Samuel's game. I remember when he said the Buffalo Bills were his last pre-draft visit. I thought, oh, man, if you get him in Buffalo with what they had last year in Brown and Beasley, I thought even last year that could have been a really special unit. He has all the talent in the world. He's a mismatch for just about any team that he goes up against, because like you said, you can use him outside, inside in a lot of variety of ways. So the Bills are going to have to be on their A game in that matchup. Like we said earlier, though, if you can rattle Nick Mullins, get him to throw the ball half a second earlier, 1 second earlier, if you can get him to throw it a little bit outside, like we saw with Justin Herbert throwing a few balls off of Keenan Allen's fingertips, you got to rattle those guys, get them out of sync, get them out of rhythm. If you can jam Deebo Samuel at the line, little things like that can lead to some big plays, some turnovers, but it can also just lead to some 3-and-outs, like you mentioned, and simply getting off the field.
Question in here, quick shout out on Facebook, Robert Murphy giving us a shout out from Bethpage, New York. Thank you for watching, my friend. Justin brings up AJ Epinesa, and that's something that we can touch on, because I can't remember where I read it or heard it, and I would love to give credit, but I can't remember. But they had a great line on this, is that this could be a situation this week where maybe AJ Epinesa and Trent Murphy are both active, because you're going to want as much potential rotational pieces out there to help against this running attack. But long term, I do think that we start to see the shift to AJ Epinesa. I thought he played well last week again, probably in a bigger role. You didn't see him pop as much, but I love his not only his energy, but his pursuit when he's out on there, especially against the run. I think it was one play where he I can't remember if it was against the quarterback. I don't know if you remember, but where he pursued he came from the I think it was the right side, came all the way across the field and made the tackle all the way across the field. Those are the kinds of plays that I feel like earn you more time.
Yeah, I'm going to use that cliche, high motor. He has a high motor. He's all over the field. He's flashed the last few weeks, and every week he gets a little bit more a few more snaps, some more opportunities, and I feel like it's never the big play. It's never the strip fumble necessarily. It's not the interceptions. It's nothing like that, but he seems to make 1 or 2 splash plays per game, and you kind of forget about him by the end of the game. But he's out there, and he's making those plays, and I feel like he is doing a much better job in terms of pursuing the quarterback, in terms of stopping the run. And you've seen that all around game. When he came out, a lot of people were comparing him to, at least that I read about, were comparing him to Shaq Lawson, saying him more like Shaq Lawson during his Bills time, not Shaq Lawson Clemson. And I'm starting to see that. I'm starting to see that comparison of, okay, this guy can stop the run. He can get after the quarterback a little bit. I'm starting to see those flashes, and it's taken a little bit longer because there was not a traditional offseason. But all of a sudden, Epinesa is playing good football, and this draft class is having a sneaky good year for Brendan Beam.
All right, we're going to get to our prediction portion of the program here on the Saturday Night Shout. This might have to be a new thing, Ryan. We might have to do the Saturday Night Shout. We got our branding all ready to go. I'm picking the Bills in this one. I think that talent-wise, top to bottom, I think that the more talented team. I think that they have a little bit more runway with the day later Monday game to get mentally prepared for the task at hand. Josh Allen, an extra day of preparation for this defense. And I think that it's almost convenient for the Bills that they're coming off of a game where the 49ers put their best game on tape of the season, because they can dig into that and really try to figure out the best way to attack it. I think this will be a big game for Brian Daboll to figure out how to utilize all the weapons. And Gabriel Davis, to me, is the key. Can he play that John Brown role if he gets more targets? Or, if we start to see Stephon Diggs maybe be a little bit more effective this week playing alongside him. All those little pieces of this game, I think, are important. I think the Bills will have a balanced attack. I think they'll end up throwing the ball more than 30 times. I think Josh Allen will take care of the football, and I think the Bills will win 27-20.
I have the Bills winning 31-23, more balanced attack. I see Moss and Singletary going for about 130 on the ground combined against a very good 49ers defense. But we saw those flashes, and I saw a stat out there today. And I'm blanking on her name. It's Michelle something. Mm-hmm. But she said that for every 10 carries 10 carries that Devin Singletary gets, or maybe it's actually 5, he breaks off 1 10-plus yard run. And Zach Moss is in the top 10 of those rankings as well. It's just the fact that they don't get that workload. I think we're going to start seeing a more balanced offense there. Gabriel Davis made some really good catches last week, going up, getting the ball in that free play, jumping up and getting a ball in another play for the Bills. So he flashed a little bit. And I think we're going to see the Bills win this for another reason too, and that's special teams. Andre Roberts, maybe the unsung hero of this Bills roster in 2020. Good reason that he is first in the AFC in return specials for the Pro Bowl. He's been phenomenal. Bold prediction, at least 140-yard return on Monday night in prime time to set up the Bills with great field position. I'm not going to say taking it to the house. It's so hard to do. But at least 140-yard return in this game to set the Bills up for one of their scores.
5th in average starting field position this season, 31.3 yard line per possession. That is just special stuff. And, you go back to the summer and the conversations about the need to keep Andre Roberts. And there's a lot of people with their chest out right now. These last, couple months as Andre Roberts has been a huge piece of what the Bills have been able to do. So both of us got the Bills. It's going to be fun covering some Monday Night Football. This is, the Kansas City game was kind of Monday Night Football. It was like 5 o'clock. Doesn't really count. We got this one. Next week is Sunday Night Football against Pittsburgh. 3 weeks, we got at New England on Monday night once again. So a lot of primetime football for your Buffalo Bills over the next couple weeks. All right, guys, we're going to get out of here. Thank you so much for all your participation. We always appreciate it so much. Make sure you find us on all the audio platforms, Spotify, Stitcher, Apple, Google, wherever you do listen to your podcast. Subscribe and take a screenshot of that. Email it to me, mparrino@nyup.com, and that will automatically place you in a Bills game day Zoom with yours truly and Mr. Ryan Talbot. We're doing those every game day. As a matter of fact, it's a good reminder, Ryan. I got to start putting together Mondays as we get to our next one going here. Check out, I'll be on the pregame show tomorrow. We'll have a pregame show on Channel 4 if you're local in Buffalo. It also streams. I usually tweet out that link over with the guys, Josh Reed, Thad Brown, Sal Capaccio, Tim Graham, Heather Prusak. It's an awesome time. And then we'll also have a pregame show on Monday night at 7. We'll have the Shout podcast after the game. Final thought, Ryan Talbot.
You kind of started covering it. This is Buffalo's big test coming up over these next 4 weeks, showing that they are ready to be a legitimate team in front of a national audience. Monday Night Football this week, Sunday Night Football against the Steelers. Even that Saturday game against the Broncos at 4:30 is a nationally televised game. You go to then against the Patriots on Monday night. 4 of their last 5 games are going to be played with everyone watching them. The Bills need to show up, show out, and show that they are a legitimate team in the AFC.
There it is. We will see you on Monday night. Thank you so much for making us a part of your Saturday night. Have a great rest of your weekend, everybody. Enjoy some football tomorrow.
Ready for football? With every game a home game, Tops is ready for you with its TV a Day giveaway. For 6 weeks, every day you shop is a new chance to win a massive 70-inch 4K TV. Shop Tops for the best deals in town, in-store, or online to win.